interesting panel now from various parts of cybersecurity. We're going to talk about the world we're dealing with and the security issues we face. A couple of sessions ago, we had Alex Stamos on stage from Facebook, and he made the comment that security is getting harder every year, and that, well, for those of us in cybersecurity, it means we'll never be out of a job. But if we look at what happened recently in the news here in the British Isles and Ireland, we had the story about TalkTalk. So it's a multi-billion-dollar telecoms company, and their defenses got breached, and they realized that customer data had been stolen, and the CEO went in front of the news cameras and made the standard admission and mea culpa, and we're very sorry, but super sophisticated attack, and people were just starting to feel sorry for them, and then the police arrested a 15-year-old. We're thinking, guys, how can this happen? So, who wants to start? Eugene.
I haven't met the 15 years old
to
know how exactly that happened, but this is the whole. This case here illustrates how easy it gets to become a cyber criminal. So basically, everything is out there. Those of you who are searching stuff every day, you can find everything, anything at all, like from I don't know, buying illegal drugs to cyber weapons. And if you're persistent enough, if you're skilled enough, and you have an IQ, you can basically, achieve a lot of amazing things. The thing is, you have to want to achieve good things than the evil things. And this case illustrates that two things, to my mind. First of all, I think they weren't paying enough attention to their cybersecurity, because I think that with enough attitude, it could be at least not that big. And second, I think that it is safe to say we can expect more cyber attacks in the future.
Now, the indications or suggestions are that it was some sort of web platform that was hacked, that maybe it was a SQL injection attack. And Rami, I know you guys specialize in hardening people's web servers and detecting the bad stuff. I mean, would you have stopped this attack, or how often do you see this happening?
Yeah, I mean, it's getting to be a bigger and bigger threat landscape out there. Group of four, it was 4 teenagers, right? That attacked you, but it's one company versus an infinite amount of expert and novice attackers. And so more and more people, I think Eugene's right, have to think about security as part of their basic core infrastructure. And I think too many people relax on that. I don't know the specifics of the attack. I know we do secure web applications, but we alone aren't enough to stop everything out there as far as threats. You have to have a really sophisticated plan and a stack of things to be able to stop the threats that are out there.
So, Todd, do you think perhaps that the bad guys are both too numerous and too connected and organized in how they share stuff? I mean, are we outnumbered in this game?
We're certainly outnumbered, and a lot of the tools are published online, and they're very easy to get to. So it's really, I think, it's an economic war. We have to, as the security industry, have to make it more and more expensive for these hackers to get into companies, and that's the old defense in depth. I mean, you have to not only have the web application firewalls and the web security, you have to encrypt your data, you have to store your data intelligently, you have to think through many, many layers in order to increase the cost for the hackers, because they will get the tools, they will attack you. You just don't want to be the corporation that's easier to get into. Yeah, you want to be very difficult to hack.
I got passed a how-to guide last week for one of our customers, how to attack their web application. And it was as sophisticated as click on this button, and it's dumbed down as click on this button, then call in the support line and say this phrase, and then they will reset your password. And it went into social engineering, not just the web app. And it's a how-to guide that was publicly available on the web for attacking one of our customers. And that's how prolific the information is out there. It's just about anything you want to learn is out there.
And I'm going to elaborate on Todd's quote here. It's just, we in the cybersecurity community, we can do a lot of things. We're actually doing a lot of things, and we have a lot of solutions that, to be honest, they're like 10 years ahead of today.
Right.
The problem is, when you come to a huge company who is, very focused on business, on the customers, and you start telling the story what might happen, sometimes, not every time, you get this, absolutely, dead eyes in front of you, and they are not understanding that this is for real. And the problem that I think that we have in the cybersecurity community, that we can save a lot of companies and a lot of money and a lot of data, a lot of things, but sometimes it's not our call we're trying to do our best, but it should be a two-way street. People, and specifically companies, enterprises, they have to start wanting to do more about it. If they do, it's going to be way easier, because it's not a problem to develop a solution for anything, actually.
It's interesting because you talk about the defenders needing to be motivated and diligent, and Todd made a comment earlier on about increasing the cost for the attackers so that it's not worth their while. I think that's an interesting point, because it looks like it's really become a business and people are making money, and that means they're going to keep at it. Is that what's happening out there?
I think that's definitely true. Hacking used to be sort of for fun. It's now very much for economic reasons and has to be taken a lot more seriously. I mean, just to build on it, I mean, companies have to obviously protect themselves very well, but we're also an interconnected world, and you also have to make sure that your partners that you connect to are also secured. So a very interesting example, if you want to have fun, you can watch on YouTube how the Jeeps were hacked.
Yeah.
But the Jeep was hacked because the entertainment system provided by a different vendor was hacked, and it was hacked over somebody's network, and all three had to have vulnerabilities in order for the car to be compromised. And so it's not even enough to secure just your own enterprise. You also have to extend that thinking to your partners.
Yeah,
Right?
I mean, that was a target hack as well, right? It was the HVAC company that was, gave them entry point into the POS system. And I think we've developed a really complex ecosystem of interconnected companies, interconnected devices, a lot of technologies that you put in just to your website. And so it's to Todd's point, it's not about just securing your own code. It's understanding the ecosystem in which you play in and making sure that those gateways are properly secure.
Yeah, just to add that, there's only one thing to add. It's just security is never something out of the box. It's like, I think what I said before, just you cannot just simply consider yourself secure. It's a process, a never-ending process. And I think that the right thing to say is that whatever you feel the level of confidence of your company is, it's not enough in a second from now, and then in a second from now. It just, you know what I mean. It has to evolve every day.
Now, companies who have products to defend have come up with the concept of the bug bounty, and they're rewarding people for being responsible and telling them first when they find a hole. But there's a vulnerability exchange who famously posted $1 million reward for an iOS 9 attack, and they announced on Monday they've paid out. Somebody's breached it. So is it becoming a cost war to get the good guys to pay more than the bad guys to know what's happening in their products?
I mean, interestingly enough, that bounty didn't come from Apple, right? That bounty went to the bad guys that are going to develop exploits to sell malware into the iOS or to hack in and snoop on iOS devices, right? So that's a bad guy bounty. It's so public that it's a bad guy bounty. And I think a lot of companies have a really perverse attitude towards good bounties. I don't think I see enough companies that have a good bounty program, where more should.
Strongly agree. I think that actually, technically, every company big enough, who thinks they're big enough to be on the market, they have to consider a white labeled, big bounty program of theirs. They have to be open to the community and say, listen, if you find something, this is what's going to happen. And right now, only like few companies that are ready to basically feel that exposed. But it's truly fascinating to see that they do exist, and there is a trend that more and more companies, they pay a lot of attention to, okay, how do we fix the potential threat of that? Yeah.
I think companies have to engage with the hacker community. So, for example, if you go to DEF CON, which is sort of the hacker conference, it's been very sort of non-enterprise. But this year, for example, Tesla was there, and I think everybody knows Tesla was also hacked, sort of like Chrysler. But Tesla was able to update all their cars the next day because they are, Tesla's really a software company, and they can just upgrade that software. But they had engaged with the hacker community and said, yeah, thanks for finding the bugs. We're going to actually show up at your conference. We're going to engage with you in the right way. And I think we need more companies to do that.
I think companies are afraid that a bounty program attracts attention, that it makes them a target. What they don't realize is that they're a target anyway. Creating a bounty program just helps you remediate quicker.
And what is more important, I think, it is very important to interact with hacking community, because in many cases, when it's not driven by money, when the hacking community is not a business structure, what I mean is those guys, in some cases, they're driven by the almost impossible tasks. So basically, they want to do something that is impossible by design, or someone says that it's impossible to hack Apple. And they say, okay, you know what? I'm going to prove you wrong right now. And they're like doing it not for the money. I bet, this is my personal perception, they're not doing it, they were not doing for this money only. They were doing like to prove someone wrong. And you have to consider the mentality of these very people who are very, intelligent in many cases. You have to work with them. Maybe they won't hack you anymore.
Focus their energies too.
So there are a couple companies now that actually do this as a service, where they help you interact and in exchange with hackers. Companies like Synac that actually you can go hire a team of hackers to just try to penetrate you. And you do it as a service. So it's starting to become a business, and more people are trying to do the white ops type hacking. Hopefully we see more and more of that.
In terms of the trends we're seeing, the enterprise security team in Hewlett-Packard issued a report a few weeks ago, and their title was "The Past is Just Preamble," which is pretty scary sounding. So, I mean, have we seen the cyber equivalent of 9/11 yet, or is the past just preamble?
I think what we have right now in the news, it's like teeny tiny pre-tip of the iceberg. It's like it's nothing actually happened yet, because like my personal concern, I think the guys would back me up on that. With the Internet of Things and the amount of connected devices out there, the prediction is that billions of IPs will be out there, and actually every single one of them is a potential access point. And this terrifies me because for us right now, it's very hard to take responsibility for protection of all those, because, as I said before, and basically we're the same on this, there should be higher demand for cybersecurity. The manufacturers of the device for the Internet of Things, it should come to cybersecurity and say, what are we doing wrong? Because right now it's not happening in many cases. They're just doing those connected refrigerators and cars and coffee makers, and they're like connected. And then when something happens, they come to cybersecurity community and say, okay, we have a cluster F, we have to do something about it.
Yeah, I liken what's happening right now as the wild, wild west. It's not 9/11. When I think 9/11, 9/11 means an actual terrorist attack, right? Actually, a bigger catastrophic incident, and we haven't seen that yet. Yeah. But it is on the horizon. Industrial systems aren't protected. To Eugene's point, there's a lot more devices that are coming online that are not protected. Cars, webcams, all these things are now hackable, and we haven't seen that exploited for terrorism, but that could happen, and it's a very real danger.
Yeah, and it's not. It's no longer about just protecting devices. It's about protecting devices, data, and people. Mm-hmm. So a lot of the data that we think is actually fairly innocuous actually becomes an attack surface. So here's a trivial example, but you can relate it to a lot of data. There was a great website for tracking your bike rides, and a lot of people opted in, and they tracked their bike rides. And some intelligent people thought, oh, the people who ride the most probably have the best bikes, and I can see where their homes are. And so they would just go and steal the best bikes, right? So letting your data out actually exposes more attack surfaces. And so I think the world gets a lot more complex, and people and companies have to pay a lot more attention to things that actually seem innocuous but have effects that aren't obvious.
Yeah, I mean, all the breaches that are happening across websites, everything from Ashley Madison to the IRS, are exposing usernames, passwords, social security numbers, date of births, and that information is now getting recycled. A lot of people use the same username and password, and the bad guys are taking that information and then brute forcing their way into bank accounts and other sites that have actual credentials or money tied to it, and siphoning that off. So the data that's getting exposed has very real impacts out there already.
Now, Rami, you talked about how it would be important to try and take the bad guys, get them early, channel their energy, and turn the bad guys into good guys. What do we do when the good guys turn out to be bad guys? What do we do when the government is spying on us? What do we do when they're unhappy that we want to be able to encrypt our data and secure our online communication? Where do you stand on the encryption versus criminal argument?
Yeah,
I can weigh in there. I think governments should be protecting their citizens, and that includes digital protection, including encryption. I think, it used to be in the wiretapping days, there was a certain cost to the government. So they'd have a person of interest, and it would cost them something to go out and wiretap them. Today's equivalent of that is you give everybody encryption, and you only put the CPU power behind decrypting people of interest, as opposed to forcing everyone to be unencrypted.
My only concern is anytime you build a backdoor, that can be exploited for more than just government purposes, right? There's never a situation where you have a backdoor that's only used for good. And so I think our first concentration should be about building secure systems and let the government figure out how they can monitor and protect the citizens outside of that. I don't think you should purposely build in loopholes that can be exploited for other reasons.
Totally agree. Like if you're building a loophole, be sure it's going to be used, and it's going to be used. You're going to be the latest person to use it. And to elaborate on that, I think that there is a situation right now in the market when I believe that encryption would be more and more adopted by the governments, because governments are like, they're corporations in a way, and they are driven by pure mathematics again. They want to protect their own data with having loopholes, if possible, but they want to protect their citizens' data just for the sake of intelligence and counterintelligence. They want to know everything, but at the same time, they don't want anyone to have access to this information. And this puts the market in a very interesting situation where the government's just trying to elaborate on that from different angles. And at a certain point, I think we as people, we would benefit, because eventually you have a lot of choice. You have this encryption, you can finally maybe have a hope for privacy, maybe, I don't know. So hopefully they're going to do a good job with encryption. I dream to have encryption, total encryption in the internet, like.
Yeah, for everyone.
What scares you guys the most now? What do you think is going to be the next big thing to come along and upend our understanding of how to secure systems? Is it the Internet of Things? Is that a good or a bad thing in the realm of personal data and health metrics being stored in the cloud? Should we worry?
I think what worries me most is if we sort of continue down the same path that we're going down. So today we've evolved to a state because we grew up with the internet. So we evolved to a state where we give out our personal information, which is largely the target of hackers, and we give it out to all kinds of entities. So there are thousands and thousands of copies of each of us out there across the web. And architecturally, we don't have to continue that way. We could actually design better, safer systems. But a lot of the corporate interests, of course, love having a copy of our data. So it takes a change in attitude going forward. So my big fear is that we just sort of continue blindly down the path that we're on, and the problem just gets worse and worse, as opposed to stepping back and actually designing more intelligent systems.
Yeah, I think that's along the lines of my big fear for the coming year is that we're just seeing the tip of the iceberg of all the fraud that's going to happen from all the breaches that have been happening for the past couple of years. There's so much data that's been exposed already, and it really hasn't been used to the full advantage of the bad guys. And I think we're going to see a lot more fraud, everything from tax refund fraud to fake credit cards to stolen bank accounts. It's going to get to be a lot worse in the coming year before it gets better.
Totally agree with everything. And to be honest, my personal fear is that today, Google, Facebook, Twitter, LinkedIn, they know more about me than in many cases I know about myself. And this is when you elaborate on that with a Guinness, hopefully. Sometimes it's so scary that I cannot even start to describe how freaky it is. Someone or something knows more about me than my relatives, friends, and myself. This is something needs to change about it. Like private data should be stored and dealt with in a different way, totally different way.
Well, gentlemen, we're just out of time. So Todd, Rami, Eugene, thank you very much for the discussion.
Thank you.
Thank you all.